Hello, this is Catherine Bruder with Catherine Bruder Consulting. I'm a retired partner with a large regional firm, and I'm here today with Audrey Ketcher, and we're going to talk to you about new guidance that we have for the description criteria for SOC 2. Audrey, you want to tell us a little bit about yourself?
Hi, I'm Audrey Ketcher, partner at Rubin Brown. We help our clients with the SOCs. Wanted to give you a highlight of some of the changes with the description criteria. We're going to focus on the description criteria related to SOC 2 today. The biggest change in what has been issued is guidance that actually gives you 30 pages of information, some areas of focus to help you and help the clients write their description appropriately. So this is an expansion from what was in the SOC 2 guide previously, which was a couple pages. Now, clients who are writing their description have 30 pages of description criteria guidance and areas of focus to consider.
Thanks, Audrey. So we're really talking about those benchmarks that we know as description criteria and how we need to get them documented. Our clients need to get them documented. And one of the things that showed up quite clearly to me looking at this new document we have is how the description criteria requires the use of judgment.
A significant amount of judgment and making sure that there's good clarity in how it's being represented for the scope of the SOC 2 purposes. A couple areas of high judgment we want to point out in the new description criteria. We want the companies, the service organizations to pay attention to, making sure they're very clear in DC3 on talking about the boundaries of the report and of the system, about talking and also talking about third-party access. They'll also see what's been provided in the description criteria is a very good glossary to give some definition in assistance in this description preparation.
So let's start, we won't cover all of the description criteria guidance that we got, but let's start with DC2 and those service commitments that a service organization makes to the user entity. How does that affect and what do we need to do in our description criteria related to those service commitments?
I think we've got to be very clear with the system, the service commitments and the system requirements on what those are. Because what is also evolved in the SOC 2 is that is what we were opining on. We're opining on meeting this service commitments and system requirements. So making sure that that's been specified very clearly and appropriately for a broad range of users based on what's been, for example, contractually required or required by a regulation.
Right, because we've got to make sure that the reader has a good understanding of how the service organization is meeting those commitments as they relate to the trust criteria.
Right.
And I think that's the important thing that I got as well, was that it's not necessary to note every specific service commitment. It's those service commitments that are going to hit the majority of the user entities and how they're related to those trust criteria.
Exactly.
So another area we'd like to talk about in DC3 is how it covers the information on infrastructure, software, people, procedures, data. But more importantly, we want to talk about the boundaries of the system and the guidance we've got now on boundaries. Can you talk a little bit about that, Audrey?
Right. It's later on in DC3, but it's very clear to explain to us that we've got to be very specific on what the boundaries are of our responsibilities for this broad set of users. The boundaries are going to be critical also in relationship later on when we're talking about the complementary user entity controls. So these boundaries are what we're going to be attesting to, and the client needs to be very careful in how they're describing them, and we've given a little more guidance in the DC3 on how to do that with the areas of focus.
Because what I've always found is that our service organizations have had a difficult time defining those boundaries. So the service auditor can be great benefit to the service organization and helping them with how those boundaries are defined. The other areas in DC3 that I noted was commentary regarding third parties.
And the visibility and transparency for the third parties is also a newer area that's got a lot of focus with our clients. And using the description criteria helps me direct clients and give them input on how to write that. So there's transparency on what the third parties are doing in and around those systems. And it's appropriately documented in the description as it relates to what's within the boundaries of the description. But the third party access is a very good add.
Agreed. So let's talk a little bit then about DC4, because we do have expanded guidance here, and it's particularly important now with all of the things that are happening and our concerns with cybersecurity, with our incidents, and when an incident needs to be documented within description criteria.
And that's where it's an interesting time that we have with the clients when they're getting ready for SOC 2 or transitioning to the new description criteria and trust services criteria, to make them understand the importance of having their own policy, procedure, and guidance themselves on when an incident has become something that needs disclosed. So there was a lot of wording back and forth to get this description criteria of areas of focus out there for you. I would recommend with each and every client that it's got good involvement from executive leadership, including legal and HR, et cetera, before you are finalizing how that wording is going to be and what the control is to determine when it is going to become the incident for disclosure.
I agree, especially determining what is truly an incident that needs to be reported and what isn't an incident. I think that's an area that our clients struggle with, and how it has to get defined. So we have to make sure that everyone understands that nature, timing, and extent of the incident has to get reported, but that they don't have to disclose too much information, because we don't want the service organization to be put at any additional risk. So it's important to get all of those other parties involved to help with, figuring out what is the appropriate amount of information to put into the description criteria, so that the readers got the right amount of information to understand what's going on and how the controls failed and how the controls are now working to resolve those issues. One of the other things that I thought was particularly helpful in this document was the concern we always have is, so the incident happened 6 months ago. What do we do? And that decision about the incident happened 6 months ago, but there are still some lingering effects of the incident. So therefore, it becomes important to the reader and should be documented as well. And I thought that's something that we hadn't seen before and was a good addition to our information as to how we will report on those incidents.
Absolutely. And having the description criteria tool now for management to use is also helping us have a better voice as we're working with clients when we're evaluating that description. So we highly recommend you get to the AICPA website, making sure your clients and your team have read and understood the description criteria.
Agreed. So let's talk then about DC7. And DC7 talks about complementary subservice organization controls. So we've had a lot of information about carve-outs and inclusive subservice organizations, but now we're talking about controls, or CSOCs.
New acronym, I had to add that.
Of course. We can't have enough, right? Talk to us a little bit about that, Audrey, and CSOCs and what that means to you in your practice.
Well, I think what it means to business has been the biggest benefit. So business, that is the companies that are relying on these SOC reports, they can now see where else the controls are, that there's a complementary subservice organization that has relevant controls, and they should get that SOC report as well and have that as part of their evaluation process, which is usually part of their vendor risk management process. So sometimes I call it like being able to see the food chain of where the information is. Now we've given transparency on where that information is, who those other subservice organizations are, because there's accountability in what they're doing as well. this was one of the best ads. So it's something that we want to make sure every vendor risk management program is paying attention to in the various SOC reports.
Agreed. I also think that this is a real value to the reader of the SOC report to be able to see those complementary subservice organization controls and know that they should be tracing that, as you said, food chain. I like
Right.
that. I might have to use that, Audrey. That might be something I steal from you. But I like that. And it's important. And in vendor management, we've been working with our clients for a long time, teaching them that they need to look at vendor management and not just gather a SOC report because they have that particular vendor, but read that SOC report and trace through who else is involved and who else is getting their data.
Right.
That's always been one of the really interesting parts of the SOC report review that I have emphasized with our client base. The last part of the description criteria documentation that we have, it talks about a glossary of terms. And I think a glossary of terms is something that we have needed for a while. What about you, Audrey?
Yes, it's been very good. And one of the ones I'll say that we help remind the clients about very clearly all through the process, it's the terms business partner, vendor, subservice organization, helping the clients understand and how to differentiate between those three. And that's very important for how they're going to have those included or not included in their description, and thus the controls as well. So those are three examples of glossaried terms, if that's a word, that clients are finding very useful in the description criteria.
Thanks, Audrey. So that concludes our discussion today about the guidance that we have, the new guidance in DC Section 200 on description criteria. I hope that you enjoyed our little chat today and that you'll look up the new documentation and spend some time reviewing it before your next SOC examination starts. Thank you.
Have a great day.